house on the old lighthouse, and the clock stopped. The first thing I noticed was the clock. It stood in the hall like a guardian with its face frozen, hands locked in a shape I couldn't then name. The house smelled of old salt and lemon polish, as if someone had tried to erase waves and keep only shine. I had come for papers and closure, not to inherit silence. The room hummed with a light that wasn't from a bulb, an off-key brightness that pulled at the edges of memory and made the wallpaper look fresher and older at the same time. The clock was warm when I touched it. Not warm like a house in winter, but warm as if someone had only just put their hand there and walked away. I found no keyhole on its case, only a faint circle of rubbed wood where generations had rested palms. Downstairs, the kitchen's radio was a dented presence, a listener of storms before I ever turned the dial. The town had been a scatter of shuttered storefronts and a single grocery that sold bread stale with history. The house, though, was its own small weather system. Neighbors called it the Lighthouse house because a narrow tower stitched itself to the main building's spine. The town had retired the light years ago. Fishermen now used flashlights. When I climbed the spiral stairs, the lens room smelled like boiled metal and old rope. The glass held fingerprints I didn't recognize, whorls that made me think of palms folding around something you weren't supposed to hold. Down on the road, an unlit diner window winked a single neon curve and then went dark. The world behaved like a set that had been left mid-performance. At night, the house rearranged its hush. Wind threaded itself through the eaves and turned every small thing an empty cup, a stack of unpaid bills, into a punctuation mark. I slept in the back room with the radio tuned to static because silence felt like an accusation. In the morning, I found the rocking chair had moved an inch. Not much, but enough. I wrote a list of things that had changed. One moved chair, a damp patch that wasn't there, a single page from my journal gone. The list looked petty, but the pages watched me like a ledger. I found letters in the attic, blurred envelopes, a neighbor's name I remembered for her bread, but not for her handwriting. They were unsent, folded small, and each line ended with the same incomplete phrase: "I will come back when the clock." The rest trailed into a jagged scrawl. The attic smelled of cedar and salt, and the faint memory of someone humming a tune that refused to resolve. I kept expecting to hear a door close or a footfall to answer the question that had lanced the pages, but the only response was the house's patient reply, the creak of its own age. I began keeping time by other things: the ferry horn, the way gulls gathered on the North Pier, the kettle's whistle. In each measure, the house insisted on its own count. At 3 in the afternoon, the hall clock knocked its wooden throat once, a thud I could feel in my teeth, though the hands did not move. That night, a puddle appeared under the mainsail coat hooks, as if the house had wept a small, private rain. I felt watched by an order that did not correspond neatly to day and night, some ledger that marked moments I couldn't yet read. When I met the neighbor who still took mail, she blinked like someone surprised into honesty. "They say the house keeps a tally," she said, handing me the sealed bundle of unpaid correspondence. Her fingers shook, not from age, but from something like remembering. "People leave things here. Sometimes they come back, sometimes they don't. It was the kind of thing you tell a newcomer to make the map of the town coherent. Later, alone, I tried to decide whether comfort or threat hid in that sentence. Comfort felt thinner. At twilight, I discovered the brass key under a loose floorboard by the kitchen sink. It fit a small door at the base of the grandfather clock that I had never noticed. The panel opened onto a dark cavity, smelling faintly of lavender and sea air, and inside lay a single photograph folded 3 times. When I unfolded it, I saw the house's front steps and a figure on them, only the back of a head, hair windblown, a posture that suggested waiting. Written on the back, in an unfamiliar hand, weighed and found wanting of forgetting. Days bled into a slow, deliberate rhythm. I marked them in the journal by drawing small clocks in the margins, empty faces, hands omitted, and then by drawing keys when I found them. The town clock tower chimed in a cadence that didn't match my marks. Sometimes at noon, the grandfather clock thumped twice like a heartbeat. Sometimes it shushed a sound I hadn't yet made. Once, while washing dishes, I saw in the sink's pool of water a ripple that formed the shape of a handprint, but didn't wet the counter. My careful life began to look porous. I started hearing voices, though not words at first, only the cadence of someone adjusting to measuring breath. They were on the other side of doors, behind the wallpaper, in the thin space between sleep and waking. I would stand very still and ask myself whether the sounds were memory or house. Once, in the upstairs bathroom, the mirror fogged as if from a breath that did not belong to me, and the outline of a child's drawing appeared in the mist, a boat and a clock with no hands. I scrubbed the glass until my knuckles ached. Nothing but water ran down. One evening, the radio that had been a background hum tuned itself to a station that played nothing but static, and then, briefly, a voice reciting a list of addresses. My name was not on it, but the cadence made my name feel like an omission. The house answered with a new habit. It placed objects where I would find them. A child's wooden boat on the mantel, a button sewn into a curtain hem. Each object felt like a punctuation in a sentence I could not yet read. I began to imagine the house writing to me in small, precise handwriting. I tried to leave. The car wouldn't start at first, then it wouldn't make more than a cough. When I returned with a neighbor's help, the house looked as if it had adjusted slightly crooked shutters, a threshold worn in a new place. The grandfather clock had made room for itself in the house's narrative, and for the first time the hands trembled, moving an imperceptible notch. I slept in the car in the driveway that night with the engine running, and thought about sleeping in other cars, other towns, other calendars. The house humored me by keeping the porch light off. In the journal, I found a margin note written in a hand that wasn't mine. Do not trust the hour that counts backward into the rooms. It was not dated. The thought of a clock counting backward felt excessive and apt, like a metaphor the house decided to become. I began to test it, leaving food on the table, returning to find crumbs arranged in small, deliberate patterns, as if someone else had eaten precisely what grief required. It was easier to say the house was strange than to accept that it had preferences and a memory longer than mine. The final night, if any night in that house could be called final, came with a fog so dense The lighthouse lens seemed to hold a throat of milk. I sat in the rocking chair and listened to the clock's case sigh. At some point between midnight and a dawn that hesitated, the clock's hands unlatched and moved backward, not with menace, but with the patient deliberation of someone undoing a stitch. In the window, I saw a silhouette on the porch step, the outline of the figure from the photograph, turned to the world in a way that was both an arrival and a farewell. I opened the front door. The figure was there, but made of nothing I could name. A posture like someone remembered, a coat like a memory's shape. It did not speak, did not need to. We recognized each other the way people recognize the end of a song without knowing the melody's title. The house exhaled. The clock stopped and kept its new place, no longer a frozen accusation, but a bookmark between then and not then. I slid the brass key back into the loose floorboard, and for a moment, I thought I had finished the bookkeeping. When morning came, the town's clock tower chimed in its usual rhythm, and the sea resumed a patience I had thought peculiar. The photograph reappeared folded on my kitchen table, but the person on the step had left no footprints in the sand. I could have told myself 100 reasons: exhaustion, grief, the tenacity of houses to hold onto the lives that pass through them. But in the margin of the journal's last page was a line: sometimes places keep the time of the people who forget to leave. That line had no author I could name, and it hummed for days afterward like a bell just beneath hearing.